Hello and welcome to discussion today on Rajya Sabha TV. I am Tina Jha. The first half of the 253rd session of Rajya Sabha concluded on Friday. During this two-week period, the House clocked 99% productivity. Now, if we break it up week-wise, the productivity of the upper house this week was 113% and 82% in the first week. Out of 45 hours and 4 minutes, only 30 minutes were lost due to disruptions. 27 hours and 11 minutes were spent on debate and discussion. Over 60% of functional time was spent for discussion on the motion of thanks to the President's address as well as the General Budget 2021-22. Besides, 3 bills were also passed by the upper house, which include the National Capital Territory of Delhi Laws Special Provisions Second Amendment Bill 2021, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganisation Amendment Bill 2021 and the Major Port Authorities Bill 2020. So on this edition of discussion today, we will talk about the first part of the 253rd session of Rajya Sabha and get a perspective from experts on what for them have been the key takeaways from the just concluded two-week session, the first part of the 253rd session of the upper house. We are joined by 2 guests on the program today. Let me introduce them to you. We have with us Mr. Sanjay Singh, senior journalist, and Mridula Raghavan, she's Program Manager, PRS Legislative. Welcome both of you on this edition of discussion today on Rajya Sabha TV. Mridula, let me begin the program with you. So if we talk about in terms of productivity in the first part of the 253rd session of Rajya Sabha, compared to the previous sessions in the previous years, how has it been?
So let me do this. Instead of comparing it versus the previous sessions that we have seen, let me compare it to the other house.
Sure.
So while Rajya Sabha recorded 99% productivity, as the chairman said this morning at the end of his at the end of the sitting, if you compare that to what happened in Lok Sabha, a lot of time was lost due to disruptions. This just goes to show that Rajya Sabha was able to build consensus between opposition and the treasury benches, which, if you compare it to Lok Sabha, seemed to be lacking initially at least.
Okay. Mr. Singh, so 99% productivity, during which, several important discussions took place on the general budget, on the motion of thanks. What, according to you, have been the high points of the first part of the session?
The record 99% by itself is a huge achievement.
Yes.
And that compliment to all political parties concerned, all members out there, ruling party and the chair and deputy chair. More than the time, the record 99%, I would also like to comment on the spirit of Rajya Sabha in this particular session. See, previously it was Lok Sabha which was broadly functional. Comparative analysis between Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha,
right.
And disruptions were more in Rajya Sabha. This time around, disruptions have been more in Lok Sabha. That by itself is a huge change, and 3 things I would point out in particular. A, the Thanksgiving motion, all parties participated, all leaders participated, and broadly it was focused on the farmer agitation out there on that is happening around the national capital, on borders of national capital, and some people are trying to whip up passions also besides Punjab, parts of Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh. The Prime Minister's response to it, that was Prime Minister, as usual, was very convincing, assertive, and made his points very clear. The distinction he made between the Andolan GV, a new term which he coined during his response in Rajya Sabha to the debate, that by itself was very interesting and generated quite a great deal of amount of debate in all public platforms. He also went at length to explain, basically his thrust was confident India, how confident India is now is poised to be in the league of top nations. Post-COVID, the world order is going to change, and how India should prepare by itself. And in that context, he talked about farmer agitation out here and how some people are trying to mislead them. The law by itself, he was not going down on the reform. That part is very clear. The government is, however, very keen to talk about the problems that they have. That problem is not forthcoming from them. That is one point. The another thing which I would say, talking about spirit of Rajya Sabha, the difference between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, another very good instance that we saw in Rajya Sabha was when Prime Minister spoke about when on farewell of Ghulam Nabi Azad.
Yes.
Rajya Sabha has this beautiful tradition that retiring members are given a farewell, and the member who retires speaks out. And generally, when he speaks, the retiring member, he speaks from heart. His experience, his anecdotal things, how he was in the house and how he thinks should be. And that was a great, great moment when Prime Minister became very emotional, particularly in a situation and at a time when many people believe that ruling party, ruling establishment and opposition are at complete loggerheads. Many people say that there is complete lack or breakdown of dialogue between ruling establishment and the opposition, Congress in particular. In this particular case, when Prime Minister was speaking and the way Ghulam Nabi Azad and some other leaders in Congress benches were responding, Mr. Rajab also became very emotional. We got a sense that the dialogue process between opposition leader of opposition in upper house, Ghulam Nabi Azad and Prime Minister was always open, and they shared a very cordial relationship. Another instance that we found out of this cordiality and communication between the Prime Minister, his other leaders in the ruling establishment and the opposition, when PDP member lauded Prime Minister's effort, what he has done in Kashmir. And Prime Minister said as to how he used to interact with the MP, the outgoing MP of opposition of PDP, and not only him, but also his family. And they used to talk about various things about Kashmir and also about the house. Third thing which happened today, the budget, of course, was passed, and Rajya Sabha, as it is, does not have much of a role in budget or money bills. But the fact remains that this is upper house, so things have to be discussed there. That was discussed in detail, threadbare, and we got a response from the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. She gave a very kind of convincing reply. The MOS also gave some very convincing reply, and other members raised valid points. But the point I'm making on this day, when Rajya Sabha first part of this budget session closes today, Dinesh Trivedi resigned. A member who has still quite a lot of time left in Rajya Sabha. Generally, it requires great deal of courage and conviction to quit a post of Rajya Sabha MP when you are already there. And he said, I have a bungalow here, I'm an MP here. What else can one demand? And at this moment, the choice was to quit or be quiet. He chose to quit. So that by itself is a huge, huge commentary on the party he belonged, or at least belongs till now, the TMC, and the processes and internal churning that goes around for people who are in public life. The kind of traumas and tensions.
Yes, and just ahead of the elections, of course, goes on to say quite a lot about, his position in the party and, of course, of the ruling party as well in the state of West Bengal. But coming back to, the high points, the key takeaways, since we're talking about the productivity of the upper house, and Mr. Singh also mentioned the spirit of, the upper house, the cordial relation that the leaders, despite being in opposition parties, share. And this is very rare because normally the public perception is that the leaders belonging to opposition parties are at loggerheads. But this, especially, the Prime Minister turning emotional and Ghulam Nabi Azad as well in his farewell speech goes on to reflect the relationship that leaders should, have towards each other in a mature democracy despite their differences. So coming back to the Rajya Sabha's legislative business, Mridula, three important bills were also passed. Pending for some time was the Delhi laws, and of course it goes on to provide a lot of hope to the citizens of Delhi who have been looking for this regularization of colonies. So tell us more about how this bill is going to benefit those living in unregularized colonies in the national capital.
So going into the session, Parliament had 4 ordinances that had been promulgated during the intersession that needed to be taken care of.
Yes.
So one of them is, of course, the Delhi NCT bill. Then there were two others, and then the fourth one was the Air Pollution Ordinance. 3 of the 4 bills have been passed in one house or the other, and the fourth, the Air Pollution Ordinance, remains. Particularly about NCT, yes, it is to regularize unauthorized colonies. This just gives them an extension of up to another 3 years until the end of 2023.
Okay. Mr. Singh, coming back to the point that you raised, that in democracies there can be differences, but discussions are the only way forward, and this has repeatedly been asserted by the government as well. Perhaps the government could build a consensus in the upper house. That could not happen in the lower house. The vice president also went on to express concern about the level of discussions. He said it's declining. From your experience, do you want to comment on, how this level of discussion in the upper house, which is, of course, the House of Elders, has been declining, that the chairman himself had to, comment on the declining state of affairs when it comes to debate and discussion in the House?
The chairman, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, has a great deal of experience in public life. He has also been in parliament for long, and he has held various positions in the government as a minister. He was also parliamentary affairs minister, so he had been interacting when he was in the government as parliamentary affairs minister. He was also interacting with leaders in opposition. He has seen parliament and parliament evolution that has taken place. But the fact remains, when last session closed, in fact, Rajya Sabha saw a situation which to any rational mind in India, somebody would get agitated. You don't ever like to think that this was Parliament of India. Complete rowdyism, hooliganism, gundaism also, I would say. And some members, see, because upper house is taken always as the fact that this is called upper house. The notion that goes out that upper house is house of seniors, people who are not directly elected, but the fact they're representative of states, and therefore they represent interest of the state, and they're leaders of certain stature, and also have certain acumen to be in the upper house. Rajya Sabha has seen some very beautiful debates. Some very towering personalities have been in Rajya Sabha. They have also been in Lok Sabha. And in fact, some of the debates that happened, and some members are not there in Rajya Sabha currently. Some unfortunately died, and some have retired. Still, Rajya Sabha current strength also have some very good speakers, people who actually have spent great deal of expertise and also are very good debaters. People actually like to hear those things and also get enriched through the volume of expertise that they bring on the table while speaking in Rajya Sabha. That unfortunately has gone down. So that's a concern for the chairman, because he is custodian of Rajya Sabha. He is also Vice President of India. And time and again, he has been airing his views. Thankfully, the ugly scene that we saw in last session has not happened this time. This time, the House has been broadly orderly. But yes, the level of debate that used to be there, that unfortunately is lacking now. I'm sure the members should be conscious about this particular thing, and what chairman has said will go further in minds of leaders out there. And when situation comes, I'm sure this will have a positive impact, and people will come to the terms. And also because this debate actually has been going on, even some parliamentarians themselves, and primarily the chairman gave a vent to their feelings. That's a very good thing. Also, another thing about the productivity of House. Also, the number game had changed in Rajya Sabha, Tina, lately. And the kind of majority that Congress used to have, the kind of numbers Congress used to have to create disruptions is no longer there. Also, Rajya Sabha leadership, with Congress's emergence of those quote-unquote group of 23, some leaders have started thinking more rationally than just going by the diktats of their supreme leader, who is member in other house. So that also has helped a bit in kind of bringing some kind of orderly situation and debates and discussion in Rajya
Yes,
Sabha.
and hopefully, what the chairperson has, expressed concern about will resonate with the members. And the next session, we're all hopeful, should be better in terms of debate and discussion. Mridula, what was different in the Rajya Sabha this time was that the budget discussion, the discussion on the general budget began in the upper house, which in normal circumstances begins first in the lower house, which is, of course, the house of the people, the directly elected representatives sit there. And also the Prime Minister's reply to the discussion on the motion of thanks also happened first in the upper house. And usually we see that also happens first in the lower house and then in the upper house. Was it solely because of disruptions, or is it a different kind of approach that was being followed this time?
So I think you're right. This ties back into the disruptions that happened in Lok Sabha last week. A ton of time was lost. Mm-hmm. So going into this week, Lok Sabha was a little behind. Their motion of thanks to the president's address only started this week, which meant that Rajya Sabha was slightly ahead, and which is why we saw both of those things. Prime Minister's reply first happening in the Rajya Sabha as opposed to Lok Sabha, and also budget discussion beginning here in Rajya Sabha first.
Okay. Mr. Singh, another thing that I want to, get your perspective on is the issues of public importance that are raised in the upper house during zero hour, also during question hour. There are several issues that members speak about and seek clarity from the minister. Do you think because of the constant disruptions that take place and members usually, opposition have an agenda ahead of the schedule on some key issues, this time it was on the farmers' issue, on economic recovery, also on the tensions at the border with China. And because of these, the lesser issues, but of course, in larger public good, these issues get neglected at times?
That's a great area of concern, Tina, what you are saying, that question hour, generally question hour is members' time. And question hour is an occasion when you actually can target the government. And if the government is not has done the homework, the minister in particular, and the government in general, and has not done whatever was desired, it is time that members in the House can actually take the government to the task. And this is also very informative for people at large, because the answers that are provided by the government are actually very useful for whosoever is interested in public affairs, be it economy, be it polity, be it society, be it anything else. Because all ministers in the government, their time is allocated for question hour. So that disruption is a huge area of concern. The second point, why this gets disrupted, because there is a fashion that you place and put an adjournment motion or demand adjournment. Why do you demand adjournment? Because adjournment motion is something when you place or demand for an adjournment motion, that is suspension of all other businesses and take this on priority. What actually happens that adjournment motion generally is not granted, because that is also censure motion. Not because of any other reason, but because that particular thing is not taken as urgent, so that every other business of that particular house is kind of after question hour comes 0 hour, where members can actually raise those issues. And what happens that you disrupt parliament or parliamentary proceedings during question hour and also during other times. May I also respond to what you are asking to Tina? See, for the first time, the Prime Minister has spoken first on Thanksgiving motion in his response, that is concluding remarks. In Rajya Sabha, yes. That is a great occasion when people and all members of parliament look forward to see as to how Prime Minister is responding to the issues raised and whatever President has said. This covers almost everything under the sun, because the president gives his address on all aspects of governance and broadly on all ministries, outlining policy statement of government on all ministries concerned. This time around, because Lok Sabha was not allowed to function, and therefore the Prime Minister has to make a decision, the government and the chair, and therefore he went to Rajya Sabha to make an address, respond to and conclude the Thanksgiving motion to the president. Same thing happened about budget because Lok Sabha was running behind the schedule. And this was a great occasion for Rajya Sabha because Rajya Sabha A was orderly, B the message that was going on broadly for Rajya Sabha, that the upper house was not functioning the way it was desired. So many people had also started talking about functionality, utility of Rajya Sabha as to what was the actual use of the upper house. That this has given a huge opportunity and those questions and those discussions were not without substance. So thankfully, this particular occasion, 2 occasions by default has given an opportunity to Rajya Sabha, and the kind of debates that we saw and the kind of exchange that we saw between the Prime Minister and Leader of Opposition and other members in Rajya Sabha on Ghulam Nabi Azad and 4 other members' farewell, that is a hallmark of this particular session. The beauty of it, the emotions of it, and the spirit of it, I think that would be remembered by a student of politics and also people for quite some time.
Yes, absolutely. So there have been very high points as far as the spirit of the upper house, the spirit of democracy is concerned. One last question from you, Mridula, on how the second part of the session is likely to unfold. What are the important bills that are set to be listed in the second part of the session when we come back after this break?
Right. So Rajya Sabha has the first half is concluded today. It is this afternoon. Lok Sabha will adjourn tomorrow, Saturday, and then this is the time Parliament goes into recess. And recess is a time when committees examine the expenditure proposals of ministries in detail. So when Parliament comes back in March, that's when Lok Sabha will pick up a handful of ministries on which detailed discussions will be held. And a proper discussion would be had, like a closer examination of what the proposals are subject to the, in the ministry itself. Sorry. So that's one. That's what's to come in the second half of the session. Also, during the question hour this week, the Minister for State for Finance, he had mentioned that the cryptocurrency bill, it's in the final stages of getting prepared, and there's a lot of anticipation around what the provisions of that bill is going to be when it's going to come. It's listed for discussion in the second half. So again, that's one bill that I think will be looked at more closely. The other bill that I would say that people are very keen on would be the Personal Data Protection Bill. As you know, it went to the committee, I think, about a year ago, and it's still there. So when it comes back during the first week of the budget, second half of the budget session, again, expectations around, what does the bill say? What does that mean for social media companies? Any company that's in that area, I think, would be something to look at as well.
Absolutely. So when the session reconvenes after this recess, that is on the 8th of March, and it will continue till the 8th of April. So a month-long second half of the session. It's going to be, of course, very crucial. And as Mridula pointed out, several important bills are listed. So we'll have to see how the second part of the session goes as well in terms of productivity. The first half has been really good for Rajya Sabha. That has clocked 99% productivity in 2 weeks. Thank you to both my guests for joining us on the program and sharing your perspective with us and our viewers about how the first part of the budget session has been for the upper house. So with that, it's a wrap from me on this edition of Discussion Today. Just in case you missed the television broadcast of the program, let me remind you, you can also watch it on YouTube, and you can also send in your feedback and suggestions to us as well. Thank you for your time.